Hello everybody, Nation Still Jackson CPA here. Have an important update for you regarding the PPP program and the EIDL program. So yesterday, and by the way, those programs stand for the Paycheck Protection Program and the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Program. Both are being administered by the Small Business Administration. Although the PPP program is actually being loaned to you through banks. But ultimately, there were a couple of updates yesterday that came out in regards to both of these programs. So I want to go through some of those with you and give you just a sense of what's happening with those. So ultimately, this would be a good update to my video that was done on April 1st of 2020. So if you're on my social media and you see those videos or my YouTube channel, that's where you can look for the original video. A lot of details are in that original video. This will be a more compressed video. It's really just an update. So definitely look at that other one in addition to this one to get a full scope of these two programs, okay? So in relation to the PPP program, first and foremost, the interest rate, I just want to make sure you understand, has been increased to 1%. This was done last week after I filmed the original video. I just haven't done an updated video on it yet. You still get to defer for up to 6 months, and the interest will continue to accrue during that deferral. So if you don't end up qualifying for the forgiveness, you may have to pay some principal and interest. It's still unclear right now whether the interest will actually be forgiven as well. The law basically says the principal, it's up to 100% of the principal that will be forgiven. So we're trying to figure out for sure whether the interest will be forgiven or not. But as of right now, I would plan on the interest not being forgiven. As long as you use the funds for qualified uses, you can still qualify for forgiveness for these loans. There's some clarification on payroll costs and what the definition of payroll costs are. This has been debated amongst various professionals and with the banks. A lot of banks are doing different things, and so they actually came out and clarified exactly what it should be. So it should basically be the gross payroll for your employees. Okay, the gross payroll is essentially, let's say someone makes, you give them a $10,000 salary per year. That's essentially what the gross payroll is. So it's their essentially their $10,000 salary. It would include any bonuses and things like that that are paid out, but it's basically the gross payroll cost number. So you don't reduce it for FICA taxes that are withheld from employees' paychecks. You don't reduce it for withholding of federal or state taxes from the employee's paycheck. It's the gross amount that you have for payroll expenses. It does not, that they made it also very clear that it does not include the employer portion of FICA taxes though. So if for the employer portion of Social Security and Medicare taxes, that is excluded from the definition of payroll costs when you're calculating the maximum loan amount you can get under the PPP program. So other costs that are included in there would be healthcare benefits, so medical, dental, and vision would be included in there. Employee wages and salaries, obviously, vacation, parental, family, sick leave, and retirement benefits. So if you have a company match that you usually have for the company, that can be included as well. State and local taxes assessed on the compensation of wage employees. What that refers to is items that the employer has to pay that is not basically reduced from the employee's paycheck. So that would be like unemployment compensation, and if there's any other type of tax that a state imposes on the employer related to an employee's pay. Okay. Wages and salaries, as a reminder, are still capped at $100,000 annual amount, and they clarified that that is just for the cash payment portion. So essentially out of the gross pay, that's what you reduce, not any other benefits like retirement plan benefits or healthcare benefits or anything like that. It's not a total compensation number. It's just related to the gross payout number or cash payment number essentially. So if you have an employee that makes $120,000 as a salary, and they also get $10,000 of health insurance benefits, and they also get $10,000 of employee match for their 401k, you still include the $10,000 for the health and care and the $10,000 for the employee match. You just don't include $20,000 of their salary, essentially. Okay, so that's kind of the update there. In terms of the whole federal taxes item, I don't necessarily agree with that based on how the law is written. The law there basically says that it only excludes federal taxes for the employer that were paid between February 15th and June 30th of 2020. So I'm not sure why they have made this assessment, but essentially that's the rule that came out from the SBA. So that's what the rule that all the lenders are going to have to follow from today forward, or risk not getting the loan guaranteed. So unfortunately, we have to just go ahead and comply with that. It does ultimately reduce the amount of loan, the loan principal amount that you're eligible for by taking that out of the equation, but we'll have to just comply with that. Payroll costs for the employees whose principal residence is not in the U.S. must also be excluded from payroll costs, just as an FYI. Independent contractor costs, they also make very clear that independent contractor costs have to be excluded from the gross payroll. The rationale behind that is, and I've been saying this from the beginning, the rationale behind that is the independent contractors can qualify for these loans themselves independently. And so if they were to give you money to pay the independent contractor, and then the independent contractor turned around and also got money, that would basically be double dipping. And so they're trying to avoid that situation, which is why they're not giving you the cost for independent contractors. Okay. If you are a seasonal business and you were not operational by February 15th of 2020, they're saying that you can still qualify as long as you were operational during an 8-week period between February 15th of 2019 and June 30th of 2019. So there's a general rule that you have to have had employees on the payroll by around the time of February 15th. They're basically giving you an exception to that if you're a seasonal business, as long as you have employees that were operating between February 15th and June 30th of 2019. There's only one signature that is required on the loan agreement for these PPP loans. They came out and said that. And so if you have multiple owners, really only one owner needs to basically approve the PPP loan. In determining the number of employees for purposes of the affiliation rules and the 500 employee cap, they basically came out and said that you can use a certain average based on your historical payroll. And so there's some tricks behind that. Since most businesses are nowhere near the 500 employee cap, most small businesses barely have 1 or 2 employees in this country. I'm not going to cover that in detail here, but I would say if you are anywhere near that cap, and when you have multiple businesses, you have to usually combine them together. So if you're anywhere near that cap, definitely talk to a professional to make sure that you actually qualify for this program. If you have received your funds before the new rules came into effect, don't worry, they're not going to claw anything back or anything like that. No actions needed. If you were going off of the information that was available at that time, they're basically saying not to worry about that. It also clarifies that the PPP program does not require banks to verify beneficial ownership information from new customers. But if the bank has some internal risk compliance processes, then they still have to kind of follow those in relation to new customers. So that's ultimately what's driving a lot of the banks to go through and require the people that are applying for these be their existing customers, is because it reduces the requirements for them to go through and verify information, and could ultimately extend the time period that it would take to get these loans out to people. And so that's why a lot of banks are basically limiting it to just their people. That said, I don't think it usually would matter if you have a checking account or a loan account. So I know there's some banks that were requiring that you not have any debt elsewhere or anything like that. So yeah, it's just unfortunate that some banks are making this more restrictive and hard to get than others, but definitely hopefully you'll eventually be able to get the funds you need. The amount of the forgiveness, again, as a reminder, is based off of the 8-week period that begins on the date of origination of the loan. So just keep that in mind. You'll need to spend this money within 8 weeks of receiving it. in order to qualify for the forgiveness. If you get a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program, you cannot do the retention credit. So there's a retention credit, which I'm going to do my next video should probably be on the retention credit and the payroll tax deferral. So if you get a loan under the PPP program, you are ineligible for the retention credit, just as an FYI. You are also, if you get forgiveness under the PPP program or any small business administration loan program, you are also ineligible for the payroll tax deferral. So if you take the loan for PPP or the EIDL loan and you don't qualify for forgiveness, then you will be able to do the payroll tax deferral still. But otherwise, if you're getting some kind of loan forgiveness, you don't qualify for that one either. If you received an EIDL loan and used it to cover payroll costs, you have to refinance that into your PPP loan. That has the potential of being detrimental to what you want, because that decreases the time period for the EIDL loan to 2 years, but it also does decrease the interest rate to 1%. So depending on your facts and circumstances, that could or could not be detrimental to you. So if you want to use the EIDL loan and the PPP loan, you just have to make sure that you use the EIDL loan for non-payroll costs. As long as you do that, you should be able to basically take advantage of both of them. Onto the EIDL, that's basically the update for the PPP loan. Those are the most important changes that came out. So definitely work with your accountant and your lender if you haven't been finalizing the process to update those numbers or calculations. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about the EIDL advance. So if you're lucky enough to receive the EIDL advance, and I use that term lucky appropriately here, any amount you receive will reduce the amount of forgiveness if you also receive the PPP loan. So you won't be eligible for 100% forgiveness under the PPP loan if you have received the EIDL advance, just an FYI. So let's say you get $5,000 under the EIDL loan, and you get $100,000 under the PPP loan. When you go to apply for forgiveness, you will have to repay at least $5,000 of the PPP loan, just as an FYI. Further updates on the EIDL advance. The SBA issued some guidance yesterday that basically said they have, instead of what most people were thinking, which is that they would receive a $10,000, up to $10,000, it was still unclear on how exactly they were going to calculate that, but a lot of people were assuming they would get $10,000 essentially for applying for this advance. They basically came out and said, no, that's not what's going to happen. It's going to be $1,000 per employee that you receive. So they basically came out and said, if you're a sole proprietorship or you only have one employee, you can expect to only receive $1,000, which is total malarkey, but that's what they've come out and said. And I don't agree with it. I think it's controversial. Contrary to the actual law, I think it's definitely not consistent with what the intention was, and so hopefully they can clarify that or remedy this in Congress, because I do think there's a lot of business owners that really need this and can take advantage of this program that don't necessarily have a lot of employees. I think that's the distinction to me between the PPP program and the EIDL advance is you should be able to use, that should not have to be based off of your employees. It should be able to be used for other items that you need to use it for to keep your business afloat. So they also changed, by the way, the terminology. So it used to be within 3 days of an application, you would receive the funds. They changed it to within 3 days of a successful application, which is nowhere in the law. So I would recommend here, I'll just say that maybe reach out to your congressman or Secretary of Mnuchin or somebody to try to get them to change this process or change these policies with the SBA. It's really the only thing I can recommend here, because otherwise that's what you can pretty much plan to expect. So here, yeah, this is a quick update for you guys. And so if there's any questions or anything like that in relation to it, feel free to leave a comment or get in touch with us. We'll do our best to answer that. But some good news and some unfortunate news, just depending on how you want to look at it. So hope everybody has a good day. Thanks. Bye.